Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nathan Hill. I'm the Optimization Evangelist here at Next After. We're so excited that you're joining us today for this live broadcast, 6 Steps to Launching Effective Tests on Your Website, featuring our friends from Optimizely. Today, a few things before we get started. I want to thank you for joining us. This is a really cool opportunity to talk about optimization in a little bit different way than we typically do. A lot of times we talk about the different variables and different strategies to test on your landing pages, donation pages, email marketing. But today we're going to talk about how to actually launch effective tests on your website. So we're really excited you've joined us today. A video recording will be made available after the live broadcast has ended. In addition to that, we will send out links to all the experiments we talk about, all the resources that we mentioned during today's webinar. So we'll send those out this evening just after the live broadcast ends. Additionally, we want your questions. So if you look at your GoToWebinar control panel, there's a section for questions. You can submit questions throughout the whole live broadcast. We'll all get to see those. Tim will see those, and our friends from Optimizely will see those. And at the very end, we'll do a Q&A time where we'll be able to answer as many questions as possible. Coming up, if you haven't heard yet, the Nonprofit Innovation and Optimization Summit is coming up September 28th through 29th here in Fort Worth, Texas. This is a conference that we're really excited about. It's really the first year for it. It's a really cool, practical, hands-on training for nonprofit marketers and fundraisers to learn the ins and outs of optimization and how to grow your online fundraising through perpetual optimization practices. If you want to find out more, go to neosummit.com. That's NIOsummit.com. We've gone to many conferences across the country and across the world to find the best speakers in regards to fundraising, optimization, some of the smartest and brightest minds, and we've tried to bring them all into the same room, under the same roof for 2 days to help teach you and train you to grow your fundraising online. So here's just a sample of some of the speakers, some of the many speakers that will be there. To make it a little bit easier on your budget, since you've attended this webinar, if you have not signed up yet, you can use the discount code September 2016 to take $100 off. That's SEPT 2016. We have actually sold out of the regular tickets, but we've talked with the venue, and they have a few more seats that they've allowed us to use. So be sure and get your tickets as soon as you can to make sure you can reserve your spot. Again, the website to find out more to get your tickets is neosummit.com. That's NIOsummit.com. Speakers today, the one and only Tim Kachuriak, Chief Innovation and Optimization Officer here at Next After. He's going to walk through where to test on your website, your landing pages, donation pages, and all of that, and what to test on those pages. And then our friends at Optimizely, Amish Patel and Jason Giselle, are going to talk about how to actually set up those tests, how to measure them effectively, and make sure that you get confident learnings. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Tim here, and he's going to walk us through the beginning of our live broadcast today.
Nathan, thank you very much. Great job introducing this topic, and something I think we've been really excited about this. So we're really grateful to our guests from Optimizely who will be joining me for the presentation and walking through how you can apply the same kind of testing that we're doing here in the research lab at Next After on your websites. But before we get to the how part of the presentation, I wanted to spend a few minutes and talk about where you should be testing and what you should be testing. And we're going to start by focusing on 3 key areas that I think are critically important to your success of optimizing your fundraising program online. So we're going to talk today a little bit about email sign-up pages as one key area to focus your testing work. We'll talk about landing pages and why those are a really important area where you can be testing different ways of engaging with people that have specific offers and different specific goals tied to those pages. And then we'll look at some donation page experiment opportunities as well. And the reason why each of these are important is because email sign-up pages is one of the ways that you can continue to grow your email list. And as you've heard us talk about on past broadcasts, the size and quality of your email file is one of the main factors that's going to contribute to your ability to raise funds online. Landing pages, of course, are important because these are the different places that people are coming to take specific actions. You're driving traffic to these pages from your various marketing activities for a very specific goal, and these are really critical tools. And then obviously donation pages, because this is where you're raising dollars online. So let's start first with the email sign-up pages. I'm going to go through a number of different things that you can be testing or should be testing on your email sign-up pages. First and foremost is the value proposition. Remember, the value proposition is a very specific why for a very specific what. Why should I sign up for your email offer? What makes your email offer different or unique in some way? So value proposition is one key variable that you should be testing. One of the ways you can test that is by testing with copy. The words you put on the page have tremendous influence over your value proposition. So we'll look at some different ways where you can test adding copy to a page, removing copy, or even testing different copy on your pages to be able to not just get, hopefully, increases in performance, but also to learn something about your audience and visitors. Form fields. You've heard us talk a lot about friction in email sign-up pages or even on donation pages, but the number of form fields that you add into a page like this can add additional elements of friction to the page. And so we'll look at some examples of how you can focus on form fields. And then finally, button text. Button text is kind of interesting because it represents a process level value proposition, a very specific call to action of what you want people to do. And we'll look at some examples of where we've tested button text and how you can apply that same test to your email sign-up pages. So let's look at first experiment. This one comes from our research library, experiment number 1621, how communicating value of an email newsletter impacts the number of people that sign up on that email form. So let's look at the first test here. This is the control. You can see on this page, this is a home page for Alliance Defending Freedom. And right here, I'm blowing it up. This is the email sign-up offer. It says, stay informed about important issues and cases that impact your religious liberty. That is the control version of the page. The treatment, I'll blow that one up as well, is a little bit different. It focuses on 3 key bullet points about what you can hope to expect if you sign up to receive email updates. You'll get the latest news on cases. You'll get opportunities to make a difference in a free subscription to their magazine. You can see them side by side here, the control on the left, the treatment on the right. And the treatment produced a 44.1% increase in email sign-up required. And so what this specific experiment highlights is how by adding copy to your email sign-up offer, you can actually alter the force of the value proposition. And what we know is that the more that we communicate the benefits and the specific value that the subscriber will receive, we can see hopefully some increase in conversion rates. But sometimes adding copy is not the right move. Let's look at another experiment. This one, experiment number 2313 in our research library. This is an email sign-up offer for Hillsdale College. And you can see here the opportunities is for people to receive a free chapter of a new book that was being published. And in this particular experiment, the control version's on the left, the treatment's on the right. We simply took this little box of copy that told additional information about what was contained in the book. We said maybe that's overkill. That's not necessarily critical for somebody to be able to want to accept this offer. So in this experiment, we've removed a block of copy, and we saw a 26.2% increase in email. And the principle here is that this additional box of copy was actually adding mental friction. It was actually obscuring the offer instead of making the offer more clear. So by removing it, we were able to see a 26% increase in email subscribers. But then sometimes it's not just about adding copy or removing copy. Sometimes it comes down to using the right copy. So here's another future iteration of an experiment with Alliance Defending Freedom. You notice the controls on the left and the headline, be the first to know. The treatment's on the right, stay informed about your religious freedom. And you can see that the copy is different in both the control and the treatment. And in this case, the treatment produced a 29.5% decrease in emails acquired. So what we learned from this experiment is that we had the wrong copy. And what that represents is that we had the wrong way of articulating the value proposition of the email sign-up offer. So let's look at another experiment. This one, again, comes from the research library, experiment number 28289, how the amount of required information impacts conversion. We all know that every additional piece of data that we request from somebody when they're signing up to receive emails from us adds additional friction into the process, but it also produces additional value to you, the organization. You get additional data points on your subscriber. So this experiment was one that was performed with Hillsdale College. This is the control version of the email sign-up page, and the offer was to receive their Imprimis newsletter, and this control version requires first name, last name, email, and then also postal address, city, state, zip, and street address. And in the treatment, we said, well, let's remove some of these fields. Let's get rid of the postal address fields, and we created a treatment that just requires first name, last name, and email address. And you can see the control on the left and the treatment on the right. We did our A/B split test, and the treatment, by removing the postal address fields, we saw a 136% increase in conversion rate. Now, in this particular case, what this suggests to us is that we have two different dials that we can be manipulating when it comes to these email sign-up offers. In one case, like in the control, we can go for a more quality name. So in the control version, by requiring first name, last name, email address, and postal address, we have two ways of communicating with the potential subscriber and potential donor. Whereas on the treatment, we really only have one way to communicate with folks, which is via email. But what's clear from this example and from this specific experiment is by reducing the number of form fields, we can see significant gains in conversion. So from a 32.2% conversion rate to a 76% conversion rate. So these are decisions you may want to make as an organization, but these are different things that you can use to test on your email sign-up offers. This is another example. This was actually sent in from our friends at Food for the Poor. This is an experiment that they performed, and it's very similar to the last one. On the left, you see the control, and this is an email sign-up offer to receive daily inspiration in your inbox. So they send you a verse from the Bible every day, and the required fields are first name, last name, email, and zip code. The treatment on the right, they removed the first name, last name fields, and in their tests, they received a 48% increase by removing the name fields. Now the downside of that means that they can't personalize their emails with the person's first and last name. But on the positive side, they were able to experience a 48% increase in conversion. So just to recap different things to test on email sign-up pages, value proposition is critical, and some of the different ways that you can affect value proposition is by using copy. You can add copy, you can remove copy, you can test different copy, you can alter the number of form fields required, and you can also experiment with different calls to action variables and process level value propositions associated with things like button text or headlines. But let's move on to the next category, so landing pages. On landing pages, some specific areas that you may want to test. Design elements, how you actually structure the page. So things like the header could be tested, the layout of the content, the sequencing of the content. Copy, again, is a very important thing that can be tested and should be tested on landing pages. And then finally, calls to action. So let's look at our first experiment here on landing pages. So clarifying the design of the page header affecting email acquisition on a landing page. So in this particular example, this is with Hillsdale College. The variable that we isolated here is the header of this page. And this page is an email sign-up opportunity for Hillsdale's Constitution 101 course. And you can see the control version of the header. It has this graphical background with a little "We the People," a little snapshot of the Constitution, and then over top of that is copy. Know the Constitution like never before. And in the treatment one, what we did is we removed the graphical header and we instead inserted a different headline: "Get instant free access to the world's most renowned Constitution course." And then in treatment two, so we had two different treatments in this particular experiment, we used the same text as the control. So know the Constitution like never before, but we isolated just the graphical background of the header. So you can see all three of them here on the same page. So we've got the control on the left, we have treatment 1, which removes the graphical background and uses a different headline, and treatment 2, which shows the same headline but without the graphical treatment. And in our ABC test, treatment A produced a 6.6% increase in conversion rate to subscribers to the online course. In treatment 2, we saw a 9.2% increase in conversion rate. So these aren't as big of gains as what we saw in some of the previous experiments. However, what this suggests is that the specific variable of the headline, or in the header, can make a difference and impact your conversions. So you can see the control here had a conversion rate of 37.5%, treatment 1, 40%, treatment 2, 41%. So when it comes to testing these landing pages, one variable that you may want to consider is the graphical headers that you have perhaps at the top of your pages. Moving on to our next experiment, experiment number 314 in the research library, how increasing landing page congruence affects cost per subscriber and conversion rate. So in this particular experiment, this is an experiment performed with the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. This is a landing page for their Strategic Military Strategy newsletter. And so, you can see how the page is laid out here. There's a box of copy on the left-hand side, and then the right-hand column has some key features of the strategic publication and the email capture form. Now, the problem with this page is not necessarily with the page, but it's the transition from the source of traffic to the page. So in this particular landing page, the majority of the traffic was being driven from Facebook advertisements. And this is what the Facebook ads look like. So you see imagery of a bunch of military folks in boats on D-Day, and then you get to the landing page, and it's a completely different presentation, completely different experience. So it causes a bit of whiplash as you move from one channel to B landing page. And so what we did is we created a treatment that mirrored the imagery that they were seeing in the Facebook ads. The Facebook ads were receiving very high engagement, high click-through rates. And so we designed a new treatment to the landing page that matched the imagery that was displayed on the Facebook ad. So you can see the control on the left, you can see the treatment on the right, and in the A-B split test, the treatment produced a 39% increase in conversion rate. And since this traffic was being driven from a paid source, it also simultaneously decreased the costs in subscriber by 86%. So the key lesson to be taken away here is that one of the variables that you should be looking at on your landing pages is the design of the page. And mainly looking at the design through the lens of the person that's coming to the page from a specific source. In this case, people were being driven to the page from Facebook. They were having a completely different visual experience than when they're landing on the landing page. And these are all things that you can control as you begin to set up experiments and optimize them. And I'm sure Jason and Amish are going to share more about how you can do that. Let's look at the next experiment from the research library on landing pages, how reordering the elements of a landing page can affect name acquisition. And we talk a lot, oftentimes, about sequencing, how every single landing page represents a mental conversation that you're carrying out with the person on the other side of the screen. And what we have discovered is that that conversation has to lay out in a very specific sequencing. And that sequencing typically goes from top to bottom, not from left to right. In this particular control, you can see this is with Stanford Graduate School of Business. This is a ebook sign-up page for this ebook that was published, Build a Winning Business. And you can see that the orientation of the page, the layout of the content, is going from left to right. It's like what's inside the book, there's an image of the book, and then there's the email capture form on the right-hand side of the page. And so in the treatment, we simply reoriented the different variables. We created a treatment that went from the top to the bottom instead of from the left to the right. So you can see there's the headline, there's the copy, and there's the form itself directly below the copy. All the supporting elements, the ebook image, the featured insights, endorsers, they're to the right-hand side of the page as opposed to being along the bottom. So you can see, again, the control is on the left-hand side, the treatment is on the right, and in the A-B split tests, we experienced a 10.8% increase in conversion by reorienting the thought sequence to go from top to bottom instead of from left to right. Another very similar experiment, experiment number 2472. This is one that was conducted by the Texas State Historical Association. Very similar kind of layout that you saw as the Stanford Graduate School of Business. We see in this control version, we have a very horizontal layout where we have copy and imagery on the left-hand side of the screen, and then the form moving over on the right-hand side of the screen. The treatment, again, reoriented the page where we have it going from top to bottom instead of from left to right. And again, in their experiment, they experience a similar thing, a 7.7% increase in conversion rate. Again, not huge gains, but it does make an impact. 7.7% is not nothing. So let's move on to another experiment here. I know I'm going through these quickly. I want to create as much time as possible for Amish and Jason, and leave as much time as we can for questions at the end. So experiment number 833, how clarifying the process level value proposition affects email acquisition. This is another ebook download page. And in this particular example, we're focusing just on the headline copy and the call to action copy. What can Martin Luther King teach people of faith about human rights? Download the free ebook and find out. This is the control version of the page. The treatments, we simply changed the way we messaged the value proposition of the ebook. His world-changing movement began with his faith. How can today's world changers, and the implied in the sentence is like you. How can today's world changers like you, Mr. Person on the other side of the screen, learn from his legacy, get the free ebook now, and find out? People want to get things. They don't want to download things. Download represents work. Get represents something that is for me. And in this particular example, just by focusing on headline and call to action, we saw a pretty significant increase in the number of ebook downloads, 133.7% increase in conversion by changing these variables. And again, these are all very simple things that you can be testing on your pages, and I'm really excited for you to learn about how you can use the Optimizer tool to do just that, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit with Jason and Amish. So moving on to experiment number 986, visitor-focused language on a landing page. Right here, we're just going to focus on this one element of copy, this little call to action box. Enroll for free in the Federalist Papers. This is for another one of Hillsdale College's online courses. And the call to action is to enroll in this course today. And the thinking for this experiment, the observation we made is perhaps the word enroll conjures up some, deep, dark, memories of, signing up for courses or college classes. And maybe that's too big of a level of commitment than people really want to make online. And so what we simply did is we changed the way that we messaged this call to action. Instead of enroll, the treatment says activate your free Federalist Papers course now. Look at them side by side. Enroll for free, activate your free papers. What actually seems like it's an easier thing for you, the user, to do? Is it enrolling for something, or is it activating something? Well, activate suggests that it's all ready to go. I just have to flip the switch. And that was our hypothesis. And when we did our A/B split tests, we were able to validate that hypothesis. 31% increase in conversion rate by changing the call to action to be more user-centric, more visitor-focused. And it made a pretty significant impact to the conversion rate, 26% to 34.9%. So in terms of landing pages, specific things that you want to be thinking about testing. Design elements, header, layout, sequencing. Copy, again, is another huge area of focus because the words that we put on the page are the primary medium through which we communicate the value proposition. And then finally, the calls to action is another area that you can focus. Like in the example of the Hillsdale College example, enroll versus activate, the different words you use to describe the specific action that you want people to take is another key area of focusing on your landing page optimization. And last but not least, online donation pages. What are specific variables that you should be testing? Well, you should be testing what we call radical redesigns. What we mean is a completely just rip and redo. So instead of creating like iterative tests, you may want to test a radical test that represents a completely different hypothesis than the current page represents. In addition to radical designs, you may want to test specific content elements, things like headlines, again, copy, video versus text. We'll look at some of these kinds of tests. Form design, how you actually lay the form fields out on the page can have a significant impact in your conversion rates. So let's look at a few quick experiments here. How the force of the value proposition can be altered with a radical redesign. Experiment number 3793 in our research library. This is a test that was performed with the Texas State Historical Association. This is their primary membership sign-up page. This is the control version of that page. There's different membership options up at the top. There's an element of value proposition. We wrote the book on Texas history. There's some copy that explains that. There's a call to action. The future of history is now. Join today. And in this particular example, we had to ask the question that we ask every single time when we go about optimizing a donation page. If I'm your ideal donor, why should I give to you? Why should I become a member of your organization rather than some other organization or not at all? And if we can't anticipate that question and answer it with our copy and with our program, with our landing page, then we will miss an opportunity to potentially convert somebody. So as we consider that question, we created a completely just different radical treatment. And this treatment, you'll see, uses a lot of copy. And I know a lot of people look at this and say, my goodness, who would possibly ever read this? Well, the people that would read this are people that are really, really passionate about Texas history. What we learned about these people is that they are readers. They consume tremendous amounts of content. So by using content to lay out a value proposition, our hypothesis was that we could get more people to say yes and become a member of this organization. So you can see here up here at the top, the headline is designed to arrest attention, get insider access to the most exclusive Texas history club of the nation. And then the first paragraph focuses on the primary value proposition for why somebody should join so that they can become a protector and a vanguard of Texas history. And then that same idea of exclusivity and about being a person that is going to make a difference to protect Texas history is reinforced throughout the copy. Developing innovative programs, insider access to Texas history, get access to special benefits unavailable anywhere else. And then even in the membership levels area, each of the different levels has a specific value proposition attached to it. And even so, the $25 level has actually a basic label attached to it. And the goal there was really to de-incentivize people from signing up at this level. I don't want to be a basic member. I want to be a friend of Texas level. So you can see the control on the left-hand side of the page. The treatment which was a radical redesign on the right-hand side of the page. And in the A-B split test, the treatment produced a 146.5% increase in conversion rates. So again, sometimes you need to kind of do a radical redesign. You need to completely blow up your page and start over with a completely different hypothesis and test that versus your control. And what we've found in many cases that when you take more radical redesigns, you have greater potential for significant differences in conversion. Let's look at another one. This one is one that just isolates one specific variable, the headline, how a donor-centric or user-centric headline can affect conversion rate. Experiment number 1039. This is a test that was performed with CaringBridge, and you can see the variable that we isolated here is this top blue shaded area. It has a headline there. The control version says maximize with our match. This is part of a matching gifts campaign. And the problem with that headline, maximize with our match, is that it doesn't communicate clearly what they're intending. What they're intending is that if you make a tribute gift, we will double your gift. If you make a tribute, we'll double your gift. And so you can see the control on the left, the treatment on the right. The treatment isolates the headline variable and adds additional clarity around what we're intending here. And we see a 36.7% increase in donations by focusing on that element of the value proposition. Speaking of value proposition, let's look at another experiment. This is one that we've looked at in the past here, how copy on a donation page affects the force of your value proposition. And I'm going to guess that some of the people that are on this call have donation pages that don't really have a lot of copy. And maybe that was, by design. You want to make it easier for people just to kind of move through and give the gifts. The assumption is that once somebody's clicked on that donation link, they're already convinced, or they're already sold, and they just want to go through the process of completing the gift. Well, in this experiment, we tested that hypothesis. So this is the control version of the donation page for this Senator John Cornyn's re-election campaign. If somebody clicked on the donate link in the top, they were taken to this page, and you can see there's a donation form on the shaded bar on the left-hand side, and there's a nice picture of the senator in his cowboy boots leaning up against the fence. And the challenge, again, with this page, and how we challenged this page and how we thought through a treatment, we said, hey, if I'm the ideal donor, again, why should I give to this organization rather than someone else or not at all? And by considering this question, we say, well, we need to give people a reason. If they have clicked on that link and they have not yet made up their mind whether or not to give a gift, how can we influence their decision? And one of the ways that we can influence people's decision positively is by laying out a value proposition. Why should I give? Because he's a lifelong leader and he stood up for the armed forces and he's helping to beat. And you can see how it's laying out a value proposition here. And in the A-B split test, the controls on the left, the treatment's on the right. Just by adding this additional element of copy, we saw a pretty significant increase in donations, 258% increase by adding value proposition language to the landing page. And the key learning, this takeaway here, is that there's really a danger in assuming that the potential donor understands your value proposition by the time they've even made it to the donation page. So by simply adding copy, we can influence conversion and by communicating greater value. Let's look at another experiment. Experiment number 3970. I'm going to go through these pretty quick here towards the end. This is the controls on the left-hand side. This is for Harvest, Greg Laria's ministry. The control version, very simply, it has a video at the top, and then it goes into a little bit more detail, and it has an opportunity to give. The treatment, we said, maybe people would be better served if we just took the message that's contained in the video and convey that same message via copy, via text. So we did exactly that in the treatment. So we tested kind of head-to-head video versus just text-based appeal. And in this particular experiment, we saw a pretty significant gain, 203% increase in conversion rate by removing the video and instead laying out the message via text. Forms are a big deal too, and this is something that always is interesting, I think, to me. It's just how we position form fields can make a difference. So experiment number 1007, it's an experiment again that we performed with Caring Bridge. The control version of their donation form has all of the form fields stacked on top of each other. First name, last name, city, state, zip, everything is on its own separate line. And the thinking here, when we looked at this page, we said, okay, ideally we'd like to remove some fields if we can, because that looks like a lot of work that the donor has to do in order to complete their donation. They've got to fill out all of this stuff. But they said, look, you can't remove any fields. All of these fields are required for us, and we want everything to reside on one page. We don't want it to go from one step to the next step. And so what we did is we simply rearranged the way that we laid the fields out on the form. So you can see now in this treatment, first name is next to last name, city, state, and zip is on the same line. Email address and phone number are grouped together, payment information is grouped together. So when you look at them side by side, control and treatment, you can see that the treatment looks like it requires less work. even though they require the same amount of data fields to complete the donation, the perception here is that less is required. And in our A/B split test, what we discovered is that just by changing the orientation of the fields, we can actually convey less work to the donor. And we saw, in this case, a 39% increase in conversion rate. And what we learned from this experiment is that, friction is not something that lives on the page, it's something that lives in the mind. It's a mental barrier that people have to get over. And so by simply changing the way that we present the response form, we can alter the force of friction on the page. And one more quick one here. This is kind of a newer one, an interesting experiment, number 3552. So this is a donation form for the Hillsdale College, and this is a form that we had spent many experiments optimizing. We finally got to this version of the form that you see here, and then Kevin Peters, who is in our office here, our Chief Strategy Officer, he was on Hotwire.com, I believe it was, and he was booking some travel, and he discovered this new way of designing forms using what's called adaptive placeholders. And so the way this works, and you can see the treatment here, and I'll bring the treatment back up in a second, but let me give you a demonstration. The way it works is you can see when you put your cursor in each of the form fields, it actually lifts the label up, just slightly above the field. And what's interesting about this is it creates actually less length to the form. So you can see by having the labels inside each of the different form fields, we're actually able to reduce some of the pixel space required for the form. And again, going back to that principle of reducing the mental friction, it looks like less is required even though the same amount of data is being requested. And we did an A/B split test using this adaptive placeholder concepts, and in our tests, what we discovered is that it didn't help. It actually hurt. We saw a 69.7% decrease in donations by using adaptive placeholders. Now, of course, we'll continue to test this again and see if there's anything else to be gleaned. But one just observation here is that there's sometimes a danger in just adopting things wholeheartedly without having tested them first. I mean, visually speaking, the adaptive placeholders is much more beautiful than the other form. And it takes up less space, so it makes sense that it should work. But in our experiment, what we found is that it actually had the opposite effect. It negatively impacted conversion. And we're still not exactly sure why, but our observation is that we shouldn't just take things and adapt them wholesale without testing them first. So just recapping on donation pages, what you should be thinking about testing, radical redesigns. Sometimes, again, it makes sense just to blow up the page and completely start all over again. Content elements, testing things like headlines and copy and images, which we didn't look at here, but in videos versus text. These are all different content elements that could be tested. And then finally, form design. How you actually lay the form out on the page can have significant impact in the amount of mental friction perceived by your potential donor. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here, and I'm going to turn the controls over to Jason and Amish that are going to walk through how you can do a lot of this kind of testing work on your own website using the Optimizely platform. So go ahead, I'm going to turn this over to you, Jason, and you guys will see the screen blink for a minute while we change slide decks, and then we will be off with the second part of the presentation.
Awesome, thanks so much, Tim. This is Jason Gassell. I'm the launch manager here at Optimizely. Really excited to be sharing with you guys the Optimizely platform and how you'll be able to build the experiments that Tim shared with you. I'm joined here by my colleague Amish.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Similar to Jason, I too am a launch manager here at Optimizely and really excited to share with you the Optimizely platform and really get in and start applying the hows behind the wheres and whats that Tim just discussed with us.
Now, today we're going to focus just first on how Optimizely works. So if you've never used Optimizely or another A/B testing platform, we're going to spend just a few minutes getting everybody on the same page and make sure you're familiar just with how the technology works at a high level. And then we'll actually get into the Optimizely platform and learn how you can build your experiments. So right after today's session, you should be able to start building your own experiments, and then we'll touch on what to do next. So today we're going to use an example of charity water. Amish, could you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Tim shared with us, many great examples of other nonprofit organizations that have used optimization to help them better their customer journey, really understand how to optimize various areas of their site. We're going to be using charity water as our example as we go through today's training session over the next 35 to 40 minutes or so. And I'm sure similar to the conversation that you guys are all having internally within your own organizations, similar to the conversations that Tim just shared with us around some of the struggles that you may see on a landing page or a donation form, the same level of conversation is happening over at the Charity Water team. And what they've started to think about lately is how can we optimize our donation page specifically in order to get more people to contribute, whether it be at a monthly level or at a single time contribution. So they've decided to use A/B testing to help them try out a few various ideas that they have. The team has got some great thoughts on ways that they might think about optimizing this page, and we'll share some of those thoughts with you in just a moment. But they've decided to use Optimizely or another A/B testing tool to help them understand whether or not a change or variation that they are making is successful. So before we talk about their examples, Jason, can you talk to us a little bit more about how A/B testing really works?
Absolutely. So Tim shared with us a lot of hypotheses. Our hypothesis is our idea. What are we actually testing? And so the Charity Water team looked at their calls to action here. There are actually 4 ways that someone can donate on this page, and they hypothesized that making them stand out more would lead to more clicks on these donation buttons. And so in building an experiment in Optimizely, they were able to create a variation. So the variation is the changed page, if you will. It's the modified page. And so here you can see in our variation, our calls to action went from being blue to red. So we'll show you how you can make types of changes in Optimizely, like changing your text, changing your style, changing your layout, a lot of those examples that Tim shared with us. And then as they run this experiment, visitors come to their website and Optimizely shows half of their visitors the control and half of their visitors the variation. So the visitors don't even know that they're in an experiment. All they see is either the control or the variation. Optimizely then tracks how many of those visitors clicked on one of those calls to actions or actually submitted or successfully completed a donation. So we can track all of these visitor behaviors to see how they're moving around your website. What content are they engaging with? Are they giving you their email address or signing up? And then we do some number crunching and statistical analysis, and Optimizely reported that the variation here led to a statistically significant increase in clicks on the CTA. And a lot of the results that Tim shared with us, you not only saw the lift in conversion rate, but we also saw statistical significance. That's what tells us that the change or the result that we're seeing is actually due to the change that we made. It's not just due to random chance. So if I got a 10% lift in clicks on my CTA and it's statistically significant, I can feel really confident that if I make this change permanent on my website, I will see an actual lift in reality. I know that reality will reflect my experiment. So that's just how Optimizely works at a high level. But Amish, could you share with us some of the ideas that the Charity Water team is focusing on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, these ideas that they have, through building them in Optimizely and running them through an A/B testing platform, it allows them to be much more data-driven in their decision-making. And that's really what the essence of running these tests is about. We have a theory, we have a thought. Let's make sure that we can understand it, make sure that we know that the success of this experiment is repeatable, and then we can go ahead and push this live to our site. So a few examples that the Charity Water team has shared with us on thoughts that they have, and these are some things that we'll show you how to build and how to build these changes in Optimizely here in just a moment. But the first thought that they had was around removing content from this headline. Again, one of the things that we learned earlier from Tim is that by changing content, removing content, it might make things seem and flow a little bit better. So by removing the content, their hypothesis here is that they'll get more people focused on the donation call to action buttons. We shared this a little bit earlier, but another thought that they had was around changing the actual CTA style and the text, maybe to deliver a clearer message. So maybe they're hypothesized that giving by just wasn't clear enough of a message, so they might think about using other text or other messaging in those buttons. And then finally, they were thinking about swapping or switching the layout of this page altogether. Right now, we see that the option of giving monthly lives on the left-hand side of the page, and they're hypothesizing that by switching this around, they may be able to see an increase in donations to the monthly option. So we'll show you how to make those changes here in just a moment. So now that we have an idea of the types of experiments that they want to build, Jason, is there some sort of a format that we can follow in order to think about how to start building our tests?
Yeah, the first thing we want to do is log into Optimizely. We're ready to actually build our experiments. And so if you've never logged into Optimizely before, or maybe you have, once you log in, you're going to see a screen like this one. This is your Optimizely dashboard, and here we are in Charity Water's account. And so you can see we've actually already started working on an experiment. When we want to build a new experiment, just click New Experiment. Give it a name, something descriptive, and then enter the URL of the page that you want to build your experiment on. So is that your landing page, your donation page, what have you. So I'm going to use the one that we're already working on, our donation page for our training, and open this in Optimizely's editor up to the right. And it's going to open up in a new tab. Here we already have it open. And when you open Optimizely's editor, this will load that page, and it allows you to start building your experiment. So here we see we have Charity Water's donation page loaded up. Now, just for a quick tour of what we're looking at here, in the top left, we have our original and variation 1. So one variation makes this a basic A/B test. However, Tim mentioned several examples where they actually tested multiple different variations to see which one is the best. So we can add more variations if you have 2, 3, 4, etc. There's technically no limit. Now, when we're ready to start building our experiment, we want to follow a 6-step process. The 6 steps ensure that our experiment will run when it's supposed to, where it's supposed to, we're tracking everything that we want to track, and that everything is QA'd before setting it live. So the first thing that we do here is we make the variation itself. So what change are we making to the page? This is all of those great ideas that we just discussed. But then once we've made those changes, we need to tell Optimizely, what are we tracking? What's our key metric to determine the success of this experiment? Is that a donation? Is it an email sign up? Maybe our metric is donations, but we actually have a multi-step donation process or multiple pages for someone to complete that donation process. We want to make sure that we can track that entire funnel or the entire flow a user goes through. Then we tell Optimizely which URLs this experiment will run on. There may be an instance where you have an experiment that should run on multiple pages. We can do that. Fourthly, we set our audiences. So Tim mentioned experiments targeting specific traffic sources, like maybe just people who came from a Facebook ad or someone who just came from an organic search result. We can target different groups of visitors for an experiment. Then we set our traffic allocation, so simply how much of our traffic do we want to include in our experiment. And then lastly, we QA and preview everything before setting our experiment live. So that first step of making our variation, we have two ways that you can do this within Optimizely. For all of you non-developers on the line, we have our visual editor. The visual editor allows you to make changes to copy, images, layout, style, many of the ideas that Tim threw out there, and you don't need to know any code. You can do this all kind of point and click, and we'll show you how to do that in just a second. But maybe you want to do some more advanced experiments. So Tim mentioned having the name of the form be embedded in the form field itself. That's a little more advanced, and that's going to require some code. So you can get a developer to write JavaScript or jQuery, and then Optimizely simply runs that code. So for those advanced experiments, we can still test it out. We just need to get a developer involved. So let's get into Optimizely and see how we can use the editor to build our experiment. So you'll notice here, as I mouse around, these various elements are highlighted in blue. That's a sign that I can make a change to that element. So one of the Charity Waters' hypotheses was that changing the style of the CTAs would lead to more clicks. So if I right-click on this button, I can edit the element. And I have several options. I can edit the HTML, I can change the text, edit my classes if I'm working with some style sheets, change what this is linking to, or edit style gives me all of my CSS properties, like my font family and font size, my color and background. So here I can change the background color. Maybe I want to make these green. So I'm going to take my background color and copy that and change this one as well. So there's many different variations we could use. We could change all 4 CTAs to be the same color. I could change just the Give by credit card CTAs to be one color, the bank and PayPal options to be another color. That could be a separate variation. Or maybe I have the monthly donations as green, and I have the individual donations as blue. So there's a lot of different ways we could test this, other than a basic A/B test. But here I've gone ahead and changed the color for all of those CTAs. So really easy to make those style changes. Another hypothesis that they had was around the text of the call to action. So here we have Give by credit card. I could edit the element and go to Edit Text and choose to say Donate instead. Do that over. Awesome. So you can make those quick text changes to see which would lead to more donations. And we also had a third hypothesis around the layout. So here we have monthly on the left, but what if we wanted to make monthly on the right? You'll notice as I mouse around, sometimes I'm just selecting kind of one element at a time, but I really want to grab this whole section. So if you want to edit an entire section, I can right-click on any of these elements, and the last option is Select Container. Select Container shows me all of the parent elements of the one I just chose. So I can see that this div includes the entire left side. So now when I want to move this content, I have the rearrange option. I can click and drag this content around. Let's see. I just got to fiddle with it a little bit. And let's see if I can get it on the right. Maybe I'll try moving the right content over to the left. So here's that div. I'm going to go to rearrange. There we go. Awesome. So we were able to build each one of those hypotheses really easy using Optimizely's visual editor. Some other changes you might want to make are changing images. So if you do have an image, under Edit Element, you can go to Change Image. And here you can upload another image from your desktop. You can insert the URL of an image that you're already hosting. Oops, let's see. Having some issues here. So it's really easy to make image changes if you'd like. You can also remove content entirely. Let's get that back in place. So if I wanted to, let's say, remove this subheadline here, I have the option to simply remove it, and you'll notice that the other content moves right up the page. Maybe I want to cancel that. It's a pretty important line. So there's lots of different types of changes that you can make using that point-and-click editor. But we also talked about, what if we want to do some more advanced changes? Like, I want to change the form fields to have the text be inside the field as opposed to above it. Or I want to have some interactive content on the page. I want to add a pop-up modal. That's stuff that requires code. And so for that, we'll use the Edit Code box in the bottom right of the editor. When I pop that open, you can see Optimizely has actually generated jQuery from each of those changes that we made. And so here, if you want to add your own code, you can get a developer, and they can paste their own JavaScript or jQuery right in this box. So this really, really opens up the doors to what you can test on your website, because if you guys can code it, you can experiment with it. So if you want to learn more about the code editor, just click here in the bottom left to learn more. That'll take you to our knowledge base. It's super thorough, and it tells you everything you need to know about writing code for Optimizely. Another example Tim gave was that total redesign. So here we were looking at the Texas History Organization. They wanted to redesign that page from scratch. Well, it doesn't make sense for Optimizely to run hundreds of lines of code to redesign your page. So you can simply build a new page, design it from scratch, and then have Optimizely redirect a portion of your visitors to the new page design. So to do that, we can click on the variation number 1 in the top left. And in the menu, the final option is redirect to a new page. So here I can enter that URL. So maybe it's charitywater.org/donate1 or donate B or something to indicate that this is a second page. And now Optimizely simply redirects some of your visitors to that different page. But we can still track how they behave to see if more people donate or sign up. So there are tons of ways that we can make changes using Optimizely, but what if you forget everything that I just told you? That's okay. You'll notice in the bottom left, there is this help icon. This walks you through each of the 6 steps with an interactive tutorial. So if at any point you forget what you should be doing, just go here and you'll get a quick reminder. So we've seen how to make changes to our site. This is the biggest, most time-consuming part of building an experiment. But now that I've built it, I really want to make sure that I can track the metrics that will help me determine if this variation was a winner. So Amish, how can we set up that tracking?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very important piece of this puzzle, right? So we've gone ahead and taken all of that time to build these beautiful variations of pages in order to align with some of the thoughts and theories that we have about improving our user experience or our site flow. Now we need to think about measuring the success of those changes. And within Optimizely, there are 3 ways to track your goals or measure your success. The first is through a click goal, which is going to track or measure when somebody clicks on any button or element that you're concerned with understanding the click-through rate on. The second, I should say here, is a page view goal, which allows you to track whether or not somebody makes their way to a specific point in your sign-up funnel or a specific URL on your site. And then we have this third goal, a little bit more of a flexible goal, which is a custom event goal. If it's something that can't be tracked through a click or a page view, then you might think about using a custom event goal. So, as I mentioned, the idea of the experiment that the Charity Water team was thinking about building was changing the CTA text and style. Jason just showed us how to do that within Optimizely. And they started to then ask themselves, well, what are we going to measure in order to truly understand if this red button variation is leading to more success over this blue button original? So the first thing they thought about was, well, what is the primary ask that we are asking of our visitors on this page? What is the primary behavior that we're trying to influence? And the answer was unanimous. They all agreed that the primary behavior is that they're trying to get more visitors to engage with or click on their call to action buttons. So they decided to create a click goal on these 4 call to action buttons and see if there was an increase in conversions when a visitor was bucketed into the variation. So when they saw that red button, were they more likely to click on these donate buttons versus when they saw the original blue buttons? So they decided that was the primary goal that they were going to set. But they also wanted to understand the larger part of the story. What happens further down the funnel? They were concerned with understanding, well, the change of the buttons right here on this donation page, that might be great in getting people to engage with this first step. But how do we know if they've actually gone ahead and submitted their credit card information and ultimately completed this donation purchase? So they decided to set some secondary goals in order to tell the tail end of this story through using the page view goals that we just talked about earlier. So I'll show you how we can go into Optimizely and build those goals here momentarily. But again, as a quick recap, the click goals are going to be extremely effective when trying to measure when somebody clicks on a button or an element on your page. Maybe you're adding a new element to your page. Maybe if it's a new way for people to search for particular projects or content in order to raise awareness and you want to see how people are engaging with those, you can use a click goal to help you with that. I mentioned that the Charity Water team was starting to think about the secondary goals within their experiment. How can they tell the story further down the funnel? Again, the page view goals would help them do this, so they can track when people go from the donation page to once they've added it to their cart, once they've completed the process of submitting their information, and ultimately to that point of revenue generation where they might see a thank you or a donation confirmation page, and that's something that you can track as a way to attribute that thank you or that ultimate conversion back to the variation that they were part of. And then that custom event goal, if it's something that you cannot track with a click or a page view, maybe on a content page where you're trying to raise awareness, you'd like to understand how much of the content are people consuming. Is this relevant information for them? And maybe you want to measure that through the scroll depth on a page. This is an opportunity for you to pass information into Optimizely and use that as a gauge to understand the success of the experiment. So let's actually go back into the platform. We'll go into the experiment that we were building with the Charity Water team. And you'll notice up here in the top right, there's this icon of a flag. And that's where you'll go to begin setting up your goals. By default, what you'll see is that all of your experiments will start off having this engagement goal here. And what the engagement goal is it's a goal that's triggered when somebody clicks on any link on your page, right? So it's not very focused. It doesn't help us understand whether or not we were able to get more people to click on this green button versus the original. This goal will trigger whether or not someone clicks on the button or if they click on the About Us link in the footer of any of your pages. So we always recommend creating a more focused goal, and in order to do that, we'll use this Create a New Goal button. When we click on there, you'll notice that those goal types that I shared with you earlier, the custom event, the page view, and the click goal can be toggled on here. When we highlight the click goal, we can expand this out to actually see our page, and using that same blue halo that we use in the visual editor, we can use this to identify the elements that we want to select and include in this goal. So you'll notice up here that it says elements to track is 0, and that's obviously because we haven't selected anything yet. But again, we know that the primary goal for the Charity Water team is to track the number of times that these buttons are clicked on. So I can go ahead and just click on all 4 of these. 1, 2, 3, and 4. You'll notice that each of these buttons now has a red halo surrounding it, indicating that it's part of, it's an element that's included in this goal, and this element to track has changed to 4. So I can just call this the clicked on CTA goal. And I'll go ahead and hit save here in a second, but I do want to mention one other thing. When you include multiple elements in a goal, the goal will be recorded as an aggregation of all of the clicks. So maybe we have 10 people that click on the Give Monthly credit card, and we have 5 that click on the Give Once credit card. This goal will read an aggregation or a total of 15. If you wanted to have more granular information behind which button specifically was engaged with, then you would simply create a goal and only include the one element in that goal. But for now, we'll go ahead and save this and include all 4 of them and get an aggregate answer to our goal. So the other type of goal here, which was the secondary goal or a page view goal that the Charity Water team wanted to set up, very easily achievable by changing the what to track to page view. And down here, you would simply just put a URL. So we'll call this charitywater.org/ maybe they want to track the donation confirmation. And they would do that by tracking when somebody lands on the charitywater.org/thank you page. Now this URL is going to differ based on each of your organizations, but whatever that page is that your visitors see at the end of their donation process, this is a page that you can track, and Optimizely will then be able to attribute these donation confirmations back to each of the original or variations that you have built. And then finally, there's one other type of goal that I wanted to share with you. If you clicked on the Add a Saved Goal button, you'll notice that we've already created this total revenue goal for you in your accounts. So when you click the Add button, there'll be this other message here that says that's great that you're adding revenue tracking to this experiment, but it is a 2-step process. The second step, which you can learn more about by clicking on this revenue tracking link that takes you to the knowledge base article, is by taking the Optimizely revenue tracking API and applying it to, say, your confirmation page, which allows you to send that revenue information back into Optimizely. So if you want to learn more about how you can attribute revenue back to your variations, you can learn more about that in our knowledge base article as well. So we've gone through 2 very important steps. We've built the variation, and we've gone ahead and talked about how to measure the success of an experiment. Jason, what's step number 3 in our 6-step process?
Sure. So the next few steps focus on where the experiment should run and who should be included. And so step 3, URL targeting, is which pages this experiment should run on. So I imagine the majority of your experiments will run on a single page. It might be your donations page, a sign-up page, and so for all of these, by default, we will target that original URL that you put into Optimizely, and it'll be set to a simple match. What simple match means is when a visitor comes to your website, we're going to check their URL, and we'll see, does it match what you've put in Optimizely? But we'll ignore the HTTP or www. It doesn't matter if they have it or not. And we'll also ignore any query parameters. So maybe a visitor is coming from an ad, or they're coming from a referrer, and they have a big, long string of parameters. We don't care. As long as they're on the page where the experiment's running, the experiment will run. So for the majority of your experiments that are running on one single page, you won't actually have to do anything. We'll just keep it with simple match. However, there are some exceptions. If you are running on a single page app, so this is really new technology, but if you are using a single page app, we'll need to change our URL targeting to exact match. Exact match means that when a visitor comes, whatever parameters they have to match exactly what you've put in Optimizely. So again, just for single page apps, if you're not using single page apps, don't even worry about it. The third type is a substring match. So maybe I have a multi-step or multi-page donation process, and I want to change the headline or the navigation on all of those pages. Or maybe I have 10 landing pages for 10 different projects or courses, and I want to change the navigation on all of them. We can do that all in one experiment. And with substring match, we identify a string in the URL that's shared across all of those pages. So in this case, it might be /donate. Maybe you have /project, /courses. As long as all of those pages include this string, the experiment would run there. So let's get into the platform and see how we would set this up. So we're going to go to our options in the top right. And the fourth option down is URL targeting. You'll see by default we are targeting the URL we put into this experiment, and then we have our simple match. So again, vast majority of your experiments, if it's just on one page, you don't have to do anything. However, if you're using a single page app, you might change that to exact match and change what URL you're targeting. Or if you are targeting a range of pages, then you might target substring match. So maybe we have /donations. Now this would run on any URL that includes /donations. There's also fourth type regular expression. So this is going to be used more rarely. This is used to target a range of pages that don't share a string. But if you forget what these match types mean, that's okay. Just click here where it says Learn More About URL Targeting. We'll remind you of the definitions, or once more, you can always go to the help icon in the bottom left, go to URL Targeting, and that'll give you a reminder. So we've set where our experiment will run. The next piece is who the experiment will target. So Amish, what are the different types of visitors we could target for this?
That's a great question. So here what we'll see is that there are just a few examples of some popular attributes that we can target against, right? So as Jason just walked us through, we just decided where the experiment is going to run. Now we can start to talk about, are we going to include or exclude a group of visitors based on attributes that they have? And this might vary based on projects that are specific to a location maybe. Tim used an example of a Facebook ad not necessarily mirroring the landing page that that a visitor might land on. So you can create an experiment that targets any of your marketing campaigns that you may have. If you are concerned with the way an experiment, or if you're concerned with how visitors that are on different device types are engaging with your site, you can build experiments targeted towards specific devices as well. So we'll go into the platform again, and we will navigate up here to the right next to where we were creating the goals. This icon of the three heads, this is the audience targeting section. By default, Optimizely is going to include everyone in this experiment. So that's everyone that just landed on any of the pages or on the page where you just set the URL targeting in the step before. But if you want to make it more restrictive, you can click on this Create a New Audience button. And then what you'll notice is that you've got all of these condition types down the right-hand side. Now, for some of you, you may see that there's a padlock in front of some of these conditions. It just means that those conditions may not be available to you with your plan type, you can explore each of these by digging into our knowledge base a little bit further. In fact, our knowledge base is really SEO friendly. So if you were just to Google Optimizely audience condition and then put one of these audience condition names, the knowledge base will walk you through how to set it up and some great use cases behind when and how to use it. But it's really easy to set these up. They all pretty much function in the same way, where you would just select a condition from the right, you would drag and drop it over here to the left, and you would set these condition types to match what you were trying to achieve. So in our case here, maybe we only want to include visitors that are coming to our site from a desktop or laptop device. So we can continue to add device types in here. We have the ability to make it an OR function in this query. We have the ability to make an AND function in this query. So you can really get granular in the groups of people that you try and target. And it really encourages you to think about your most optimal visitor base. Who are you trying to optimize, and what is the impact that it's going to have to your overall organization? I'd like to show you just very quickly one of those that we talked about earlier, which was the referral URL. So if you were trying to target against people that are just coming to your site from Facebook, you could target against the referrer URL. Maybe you would rather use a query parameter. So if that Facebook ad has a string of parameters that indicate the campaign and the medium, you can query against one of those parameters and target a specific value in that parameter as well. So this is a great way for you to begin building those groups that you want to try and include or exclude in your experiments. So now, we've talked a lot about targeting here. Jason, we're moving on to step number 5. What exactly is traffic allocation now that we've determined where and who is going to be included in our experiment?
Well, traffic allocation asks how many. So of these folks that we're targeting, do we want all of them in our experiment or just a portion? The more traffic you get, the faster you'll get results. However, maybe you are limited in the amount of traffic that you're able to test on with your Optimizely plan, so you may want to reduce that. So here we have this big green slider that says the total percentage of our traffic, again, just folks that fit our audience criteria, that we want to test on, and then of those visitors in our experiment, how do we want to split them between the original and the variation? So getting into the platform, this is also in our options in the top right. Traffic allocation is about halfway down. Here we've got that big green slider. So we might say I want 90%, 80%, what have you, in the experiment. And then this split beneath allows you to direct traffic to the original or the variation. Now, I recommend keeping it an even 50-50 split. I think that gives you the cleanest data to compare against at the end. So traffic allocation is likely something that you won't even have to fiddle with. However, if you want to, it's there. So that's an option. Now we're rounding things out. We've built our experiment, but when we launch this, we're making a change to our live website. And so that should obviously be QA'd. So Amish, how do we QA this and make sure that everything works the way it's supposed to?
Yeah, definitely want to make sure that we don't break anything before we push it live. So a few things to think about before pushing any of your experiments live through Optimizely. First of all, let's just validate and make sure that the variation looks the way that it should. We're going to make sure that there's no page flashing that the visitor might be experiencing. So they're not noticing that they're being bucketed into some sort of experiment. We want to double check that the pages that we're targeting, the audience that we're targeting are all set up correctly. And then ultimately, like we talked about in step number 2, we set up these goals in order to measure the success of an experiment. So let's make sure that they are they're firing accurately and the data is being captured accurately. So the way that you would do that is using the preview tool in Optimizely. So when we've made our changes, we would go ahead and hit save. We could then go back out to our dashboard and you'll find the experiment that you were working on. So we were working on this donation page training experiment. When you highlight that, all of those experiment details will appear here. How did you set up URL targeting? What audiences are included? What goals have you set up? What was that traffic allocation split? So it always pays to double check the information that's here in the experiment detail section. And then you can use the preview button, and what that will do is that will open up the Optimizely preview window that will allow you to see the various variations that you've built, make sure that the variation looks the way that it should. And there's even a tab in there that allows you to trigger the goals that you have set up. Now, because we are working in Charity Water's account here, we're not going to be able to launch this preview on the call here. However, be on the lookout for some follow-up information on further QAing, and as we have here in our help guide, you can learn more about previewing and QAing your experiment by clicking on this question mark icon down here. So we have just gone through the 6 essential steps of building your first experiment. Jason, there's some things that we might want to get the folks thinking about in order to go in and start practicing some of what we just talked about here?
Yeah, well, the best way to learn, I find, is to do. So after today's call, get into your account and build your first experiment. The next after team is going to send over some additional resources from our knowledge base. We have an article that goes through all of those 6 steps with a quick couple-minute video for each one. So you can view those videos to walk you through. We have those in-app tutorial guides. So just click the little help icon in the bottom left. That'll walk you through too. You got options, folks. We also have the Optimizely Academy. This is an interactive e-learning environment where you can go through the 6 steps and take quizzes and make sure that you really understand the concepts. So tons of ways to get help and support as you build your first test. But we are sure you have questions. That's great. You can share them in the Optimizely community. This is an amazing forum of Optimizely customers. Share your questions there. We'll be replying and everyone can learn from that question. But if you just need any technical support, you can contact our technical support team at optimizely.com/support. They'll get back to you right away with an answer. So if anything you can't find the answer for in our knowledge base, you can always contact a human. So we hope that you're really excited about this. We have been really, really pumped to share this with you. We want to pass things back to Tim and Nathan on the Next After team and just open it up for any additional questions or see if they have any final comments.
Jason and Amish, fantastic job. Thank you so much for walking us through the presentation. I learned about, I'm scribbling here making notes, I learned probably 5 new things that I'm looking forward to testing. And we did receive a few questions, so if you can hang on the line, let's try to answer as many of these as we can before we run out of time here today. The first question I have is pretty straightforward question. And if we have a test that clearly is outperforming the control, so we were testing a treatment versus the control, and we have a winner and it is statistically valid We've met sample size and everything. What's involved with actually pushing that treatment live and making it the new control?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the vast majority of Optimizely users will have their developers hard code those changes back to their website. So whatever process that you have, if you have a ticketing system for making changes to the site, we want to make it permanent. And so that way, that will be how your site looks going forward. However, there may be a case where, let's say you are in a code freeze, you're not able to have your developers make those changes, or maybe it's just going to take a really long time. You can also have Optimizely serve that variation to all of your visitors. And so we saw how to change our traffic allocation for an experiment. We can change our traffic allocation to send 100% of our visitors to that variation. That way, all of our visitors will see it. You're basically not leaving any money on the table. Now, that will obviously use the traffic available for testing a lot faster. So it's something that you want to consider. How many users are you able to test on with Optimizely? How much traffic is your website getting? But that can be a really great sort of intermediary solution while you're waiting for your developers to hard code those changes.
That's excellent, Jason. Yeah, I know that that's always a consideration, is sometimes we have a request and it sits in the IT queue, and knowing that we have the flexibility to be able to push something live, even temporarily, while IT can get that request out, is that's a great feature. I know something that we use all the time, so very helpful. Thank you. Another question that came up, this one coming from Abigail, she asked, is there any type of website that's not compatible with Optimizely? I mean, is there certain kind of websites that it works with and certain kinds that wouldn't work with? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there are some that have like highly dynamic content, and it's not really easy to just say black and white, this is what will work, this is what won't. If you have a very technically complex website, we recommend doing a technical trial with Optimizely. That way you'll work with one of our sales account executives to be able to see, is this a good technical fit? Will we be able to run the experiments that we want? So generally speaking, only if you have like very cutting edge, complex technology on your website might there be issues. In that case, we can have an account executive talk to you about doing a trial. Otherwise, frankly, all of the nonprofit customers that I've worked with, we haven't had any issues. It's generally folks who are in like the media industry, who are doing tons of video streaming or video games or web apps online. That's something to think about. In the nonprofit world, we generally haven't had any issues.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Next one's an easy one. What if I don't have an Optimize account? What do I do?
Go to Optimizely.com. You can sign up for a free 30-day trial. So within that 30 days, you can implement the Optimizely snippet on your website, build your first experiment, start getting data in, and then if you decide after that 30 days that you want to continue using Optimizely, you can talk with one of our account executives about the best plan type and how many visitors that you guys will be testing on.
That's a great point, and thank you, John, for asking that question. Everybody who's actually still on the line that is attending our Nonprofit Innovation Optimization Summit at the end of this month, we'd encourage you, if you haven't already, to go ahead and start your Optimizely trial. We are partnering with Optimizely. They're our official testing platform for our conference, and so we're going to be working with you during those 2 days of the NEO Summit to help you launch experiments, whether it be on email sign-up pages or landing pages or your donation page, like we saw in some of the examples with Charity Water. We'll be on site to actually help you get those first tests up and launched, and hopefully even get some wins before you have to head home. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and get that free trial going. Another question real quickly from Michael. This is another pretty easy one. once I get past the trial, what is the cost structure for Optimize? How does that work? Is it a monthly fee, or is there some sort of subscription required?
Yeah, so we do annual contracts here at Optimizely, and so you can work with an account executive to understand, A, how much traffic is your website getting, and how much will you want to test on. So if you have a really high traffic website, you may not actually want to test on all of it. But most of our nonprofit customers don't get that much traffic, so they really want to test on all of their traffic to get results in a reasonable amount of time. Then we can also compare various kind of plan levels that just depend on how advanced you want to get with your features. So things like geo-targeting. If I want to target a specific city or state with an experiment, that's going to be a more advanced feature. So those are kind of the two main ways that we price out Optimizely. But you do need to work with an account executive. Once you create that free account, though, our sales team will reach out to you to start that conversation to understand really what are your needs and how can we work with you to find a plan that would fit.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. Here's another question from John. It's a follow-up question from John. He said, is there any sort of discount for nonprofits?
So we do have kind of incentivized pricing for nonprofits. I don't know off the top of my head if it's like a flat percentage. So unfortunately, I can't give that to you right now. But we definitely do want to work with you guys to understand how much value would Optimizely bring to your organization and price accordingly. So we're definitely not in the market of gouging our customers. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do business here either.
Great, and we can get that information from you, Jason, and we can include that when we follow up with folks from today's broadcast. So we'll make sure to pass that information along. I think we have time for maybe one more quick question. We're a little bit over time here, but this is more of a kind of a content testing question. Have you ever tested buttons that have just a donate button and that have space for a donation amount next to the button so the user can make up their mind about how much they want to give and input that directly into the form field? I can answer that question. The answer is yes. We have tested that extensively. We've got a number of different experiments in our research library of both different gift arrays, so different amount buttons that we've tested against each other, the number of buttons tested against each other, and then we've also tested just an open field. So I think David answered that question. David, we'll go ahead and reach back out to you and include that information in the list of resources that we send out after the broadcast. And unfortunately, I think we are really out of time today. Actually, you know what? One more quick question here, if you guys still have time. This one's from Michael. He says, hey, we are in the process of redesigning our website. Where can I really get an idea of suggested improvements that we can make on it live? Michael, what we could do is we can include some ideas for you along with some of the resources that we send out and follow up. So just be on the lookout of the follow-up email from either me or Nathan, and we'll include that information for you. Jason, Amish, thank you so much for your time today. We're very, very grateful. Wonderful presentation, very full of details. I'm looking forward to watching back the broadcast myself, and everybody who's on the line. Will include a link to the video so you can actually review that as well as you go through the process of running your first test. You may want to go back and review some of the content so you can make sure you're setting everything up appropriately. So Jason, Amish, thank you again for your time, and we look forward to having you on one of these in the future.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks for having us.